Hey y'all, and welcome back to There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and today we're going to get into a case about a woman that has been labeled as a serial killer, but I doubt the validity of that, and I'll get into that in the end. But first, let's just jump right into this, shall we? On February 5th, 2001, General Manager of Canyon Gate Mini Storage in Las Vegas, Nevada, called the police. The 63-year-old man, Bill Unruh, was calling to inform them of a foul smell that was permeating the area. He also stated that he and his coworker, Greg Stoner, tracked the smell to the second floor into Unit 317. The unit was rented by a woman named Brookey Lee West, but the store couldn't get her to answer. After failing to reach Brookey, the men cut the lock on the unit, but couldn't handle the smell when they opened the door, and so they notified police. But not before looking into the unit and noticing a large green trash can leaking in the corner of the unit. Detective Todd Rosenberg and Sergeant Jim Young were dispatched to respond. They were hit with the odor as well and noted the leaking can, so they called out CSIs Joe Matvey and Robbie Don. All four of them tended to believe this was a dead body call, but still they couldn't be sure without entering the unit, and in order to do that, they needed Brookey's permission. The address on her lease was a bust, as was the address in the DMV search they completed. After due diligence, the CSIs did end up entering the unit in an attempt to locate the source of the foul odor. They made it to the back of the unit to the 45-gallon green trash can. It was sealed at the top with duct tape, then wrapped with plastic wrap. Then garbage bags were taped together on top of the plastic wrap. But the bottom of it had buckled, causing a crack from which black fluid was seeping out. CSI Matvey placed 5 swabs into the liquid and tested them for blood. 1 came back positive. Based on this information, a warrant was obtained via phone using a recorded line, and they received an approval immediately. Matvey then carefully cut away all the layers of the lid, attempting to preserve as much for evidence as possible. When all the layers were removed, the trash can was unsealed and immediately called out, quote, "There's a body in here," end quote. From first appearance, it was likely that of a small-statured elderly woman with long gray hair. Her face was covered partially with a plastic bag. Sergeant Young called it in and requested homicide detectives. Dave Messner was the detective who responded, along with Sergeant Kevin Manning and Detective James Vaccaro, in order to get the contents back to the coroner's office. They ended up going to the store and purchasing a large tarp, which they wrapped around the container and then tied it with zip ties. After the body was transported, the homicide team searched the rest of the unit, finding dozens of boxes of shoes wrapped in the same green plastic as the trash can. They also opened a large black trunk and found books: the Satanic Bible, Necronomicon, the Book of Black Magic, amulets and talismans, etc. Due to the shoes and books, the team were suspicious that the killer that they were looking for was a woman. As they continued their search, they found Social Security documents with the name Christine M. Smith, with her year of birth as 1932. A picture ID was found in a wallet for a bus pass with the same name. Looking at it, police believe that they may have the identification of their victim. The next day, the autopsy began, but first, the team had to get the body out of the garbage can. Again, in an attempt to preserve evidence, they first had to figure out how to get all of the liquid out of the can. So they set it on the ledge of a stainless steel sink, and a sifter was put under it. A drill was used to put a hole in the bottom of the can, and they removed as much liquid as they possibly could. Then the team slowly tipped the contents of the can onto a gurney. The woman came out almost skeletal, but was wrapped in almost a gelatinized ball of adipocere with insects stuck inside. The insects were removed, as was the trash bag that had been covering the victim's face, and tied in a knot behind her head. The coroner, Telgenhoff, believed the trash bag to be the cause of death but couldn't confirm due to the state of decomposition. He was able to positively identify the woman as Christine Smith through the lower mandible and dental records. After confirming that information, police also confirmed that the renter of the unit was Christine's own daughter. Police buckled down on attempting to find Brookey, first using the P.O. box given as a second address at the storage unit. There they found that the owner of the business knew Brookey and stated she lived between there and San Jose and picked up her mail pretty recently. Police attempted to surveillance the area, but she didn't return. From there, they looked into Nevada Power, finding that Brookey had service with them, associated with an apartment in northwest Las Vegas, 2 miles from the storage units. When management of the apartment confirmed she lived there, police obtained a search warrant. The apartment bank statements were for a Christine Smith, showing that she was still receiving monthly Social Security deposits and that withdrawals were also coming out of her account. In a drawer, duct tape and a key were found, which was retrieved to match to the duct tape and on the can and the lock to the storage unit. The only other information ascertained there was during a talk with a neighbor when she reported that she met Brookey recently. They had gone to an oxygen bar together, and there Brookey did psychic readings using some marbles she had and reported them to be accurate. Now, many sources report that this woman is very much into witchcraft and the occult, but I'm not going to lean into that during this case because really that's kind of on the backside and it's just, I don't know, it seems like fluff information. So if you read up on her and look into her, you'll see it a lot, but I'm not putting it in because it doesn't actually seem relevant. Starting on February 7th, Matt Vey and Don started looking for fingerprints on the items used to seal the can. That included 21 strips of duct tape, 151 feet of green plastic wrap, and 3 garbage bags. After 3 days, they had 1 thumbprint and 1 palm print. As it turns out, Brookey Lee West fingerprints were already on file, owing to a long criminal history in California, including shooting a spouse. Naturally, her fingerprints were compared to the ones found, and it resulted in a match of the left thumb. Now, I talked about finding of the crime and identifying the killer, but I think we really need to dig into this family kind of as a whole. So let's start with Christine Merle Smith, born February 14th, 1932 in Ennis, Texas, to Clyde and Annie Sands. She was one of 6 children and appeared to have a happy childhood. At least that was until she was 8, when Brookey would later tell police that she started to be molested by a family member, though other family members refute this claim. Still, by age 13, she dropped out of school. At 16, she married a man named Tommy Harris, and the couple moved to Houston. But Tommy abused her and forced her into sex work. Eventually, Christine called her family, and they immediately brought her back to Ennis. In 1947, Christine met Leroy Smith, who was stationed in Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. Within weeks, Christine was telling Leroy she was pregnant, so the pair got married. He stayed with her even after realizing she had lied. Now, Leroy was his own brand of fucked up. He didn't exactly win the lottery with his family life. When he was 5, his father cut off his mother's head during an argument in Tennessee. Leroy's older siblings, instead of taking care of him, simply pinned a note on his jacket explaining he was an orphan and put him on a street corner. A stranger found him and actually took him in. But this woman was an alcoholic. And so by 16, Leroy ran away, lying about his age and enlisting in the army, which is how we got to Fort Bliss. But his years under the care of strangers had left a mark on him. Leroy was a staunch racist. This comes into play when Leroy was discharged from the military and immediately became a patrol officer with the El Paso PD. He was known to be heavy-handed to those he encountered, particularly Mexicans. Leroy also picked up a drug habit at this time, preferring speed and immediately getting Christine hooked as well. The couple fought about everything, and in 1952, Leroy was set to leave. But this time, Christine really was pregnant, and on June 28, 1953, Brookey Lee Smith was born. Their second child was born in 1956, Travis Smith, who was a wild child. But the couple weren't really parents. They often left their children alone, preferring bar hopping or just being strung out. By the late 1950s, Leroy was fired from the police department, after which he picked up the family and moved them to Bakersfield, California in 1959. There, Leroy got a job laying carpet. But the couple's relationship didn't get any better, and in 1961, Leroy ran off with a waitress and moved the kids with him. In turn, Christine got with a married man, David Gilmore. But in January 1962, David decided to return to his wife, leaving Christine high and dry. She was furious, and she was not going to take up that disrespect. So she met them at their favorite watering hole and shot David with a sawed-off shotgun, for which she was convicted and sentenced to 14 years. Leroy, around the same time, ended up leaving the waitress, and the family moved around for a while before returning to Bakersfield. Eventually, Leroy dropped off the children at a Baptist Sunnyview home for use. While this normally means a turn for the worst, historically looking at these types of situations, in this case, the children received attention, 3 square meals, and attended school regularly for the first time in their lives. They were thriving. But just 2 years into Christine's sentence, she was released and Leroy picked her up. The couple unfortunately went and retrieved their children from the home. In 1965, the family moved to San Jose. It was there that they met a woman who practiced in witchcraft, and Leroy was drawn into the satanic culture and practices. Again, I'm not going to lean heavy into this, but it is brought up many times. Brookey reported she continued to be a loner in this neighborhood until she turned 14, when she grew into her size and became a ballet dancer. Travis started doing drugs by age 9, and by the time he reached high school, he simply dropped out. Christine and Leroy eventually split for good, and Christine joined AA, getting clean and sober. But her mental stability was not there, and when she met a psychiatrist, she attacked him. From there, she was sent to a state psychiatrist, Goldstein, and for 10 years was seen by him, eventually being diagnosed as a sociopath with psychopathic tendencies. Again, this is according to Brookey. In 1971, Brookey graduated high school and enlisted in the Army. That lasted a whole 9 months before she was discharged and returned home to Christine. In order to pay the bills, Brookey worked as a waitress and legal secretary. By 1973, Brookey was tired of taking care of her mother, paying for her bills. She found an escape through a man named Ray Alcantar. After a weekend away together, Brookey realized she was pregnant, but Ray didn't want a child with her. Brookey gave birth to Susie Alcantar in 1972, raising her as a single mother for 4 years before sending her to boarding school, reportedly taking on as many as 3 jobs to pay for tuition. By 1984, she had enough and attempted to adopt her daughter to a couple working as teachers at the school. For some reason, Ray had parental rights and refused to sign them away in order to allow adoption. He even intended on gaining full parental rights at one point. This enraged Brookey, and on January 14, 1984, a man came to his residence, but his elderly grandmother, Juanita, answered, reporting Ray wasn't home. She was subsequently shot in the chest, but managed to survive. Weeks later, a letter was mailed to the residence reporting that the entire family was going to be killed, surrounding by satanic wording. This was enough to scare him, and Ray signed his rights over, and Susie was adopted and officially out of Brookey's life. Starting on July 1985, Brookey began shoplifting. By September, she was shoplifting with her mother, though Brookey was unsuccessful and arrested on multiple occasions. Then, there's really little information on Brookey and her family until we jump to 1994. On June 6th, Jerry and Cheryl Doyle drove to Sequoia National Forest in California, specifically the Lower Coffee Camp, when Jerry spotted a man laying out on a sloping bank leading to the river. The smell made him realize the man was dead. Jerry informed a park attendant, who in turn told a California Department of Forestry van that happened to be a group of inmates and their supervisors. The supervisor called the police while an inmate covered the body with a blanket, noting he had long hair, his pants were pulled down below his knees, and he had a plastic bag wrapped around his face. Detective Daniel Haynes responded to the notification, along with Detective Greg Hilger and Sergeant John Zapalek. When they arrived, they noted the body and positioning and posited that this was the dump site rather than the site of the murder. Additionally, the killer likely knew the area, as the lower camp was off the regular path for tourists. The man was identified by fingerprints as Howard Simon St. John, a 35-year-old who lived approximately 5 hours away in San Jose. Autopsy showed he had been shot with a .38 caliber to the back. Oddly, they found a .32 caliber bullet in his neck that had recently started healing. Police found his father, Sylvester, who reported to have a distant relationship with him owing to his son's alcoholism. But he knew his son was married to a woman named Brookey Lee West, who lived in Los Banos, California. Howard was actually Brookey's third husband. She had first married an older man, but after a few months, it dissolved. The second man she married was closer to her mother's age, and again, she married quick, but that marriage died out after 5 to 6 months. After that, Brookey and her mother went to AA meetings where Indigenous men were, claiming that they were Apache themselves. Brookey dated a couple men before landing on Howard. Howard had the typical alcohol belly, missing teeth, and no money, but after just a few months of dating, the pair took a trip to Reno and got married. Howard moved into Brookey's home in early 1994. All of Howard's friends reported being afraid or put off by Brookey, believing there was something wrong with her mentally. Within months of Brookey moving Howard into the home, Christine was gone. Brookey told neighbors her mother hated Howard, so she moved away. The couple's marriage seemed anything but perfect itself, with police answering multiple domestic violence calls over a period of months. On May 21st, 1994, neighbors say that the couple started the morning appearing very loving towards each other. But before noon, Howard was extremely drunk, and by late afternoon, a shot rang out, and Howard stumbled out of the garage with a hole in his neck. Brookey was arrested, reporting that Howard had attacked her, and so she retrieved her gun from a purse and shot him. Howard stated that Brookey said she was setting him up and shot him. While the hole was large, it managed to miss all major blood vessels. The bullet lodged in his shoulder and was not removed. On May 22nd, Howard woke up in the hospital and made a phone call. He called an insurance investigator and reported that he had burned Brookey's Jaguar at her request, as she had purchased a new car and couldn't make both payments. Turns out months prior, Brookey called in her car as stolen after it was found by police, already burning. But the investigators found it suspect, as the car didn't have anything removed, not the tires, stereo, anything suggesting it was stripped for parts. Days after her arrest, Leroy ended up bailing her out and dropped her at home. Astonishingly, within weeks, Howard returned to the home as well. And then on June 2nd, Brookey ran out of her house again, to the neighbors reporting that she feared Howard was going to kill her. Brookey was picked up by police and dropped off at an all-night coffee shop, reporting that Howard hit her and she wasn't planning on going home, all of which the officer wrote in a report. The next morning, Howard came tearing out of the house looking for Brookey. Eventually, after not being able to find her, he actually filed a missing persons report on her. Police responded that she was okay, but didn't give any further information. Days later, when police made it to the door of Brookey's, who should answer but Christine? She gave a story to police of Brookey leaving the coffee shop and hitchhiking to Santa Clara, getting a hotel and then ended up taking Christine shopping on the 3rd before going to work. On the 4th, Brookey spoke with Howard on the phone, and he stated he was going to Reno with $3,000 he had found hidden in a drawer. On the 5th, Brookey and Christine returned to Brookey's home under the assumption that Howard was gone. Christine said she found the house filthy, covered in alcohol bottles, and just a mess, so the two spent the day cleaning. Brookey called while police were at the house and made it home, giving a pretty similar statement to the one Christine had. Police left feeling like the two were lying and their story was flawed, but they lacked the evidence to do anything further at this time. And with that, unfortunately, the case went cold. In 1995, Leroy was diagnosed with brain cancer. It was at this time that his wife, Chloe, learned just how much he would do for his daughter. Leroy had forged Chloe's signature, racking up a debt of over $250,000 in credit card debt, mostly in cash advances. During a visit in 1996, Leroy was insistent Brookey had no money and was in debt to bookies that were threatening her life. In order to pay these alleged debts, Leroy sold off all his guns. Meanwhile, he got an apartment in San Jose where he would stay during his chemotherapy in order to rest. On February 26, 1996, Chloe and Brookey went over to the apartment where Leroy was already there resting. Chloe was looking for titles to some cars and basically trying to get finances in order, and Brookey had told her that she thought that they may be in a box under the bed as she was helping move stuff into the apartment. As Chloe bent down to look, Brookey attacked her with a stun gun. Luckily, she sort of missed Chloe, but woke up Leroy, who was laying in bed. Instead of protecting Chloe, Leroy was angry and went after her himself. She managed to make it to the hallway as Brookey ran after her, and so she called 911. By the time police came, Brookey was gone, and Leroy reported that Chloe was the one who was lying about the incident. Chloe maintained that she believed Brookey was trying to kill her. She had some large policies that would have gone to Leroy and then to Brookey when he passed away. But that didn't happen because in either case, Leroy passed away 2 months later from the cancer. In 1997, Brookey brought Christine to Las Vegas and put her up in an apartment. She was there for months. Brookey would visit every few weeks and stay a few days. At one point, Brookey bought Christine a chihuahua named Chi-Chi. But months later, neighbors reported that they argued because Brookey sold her dog to someone else. By February 1998, Christine was gone. Brookey told Christine's neighbor friend, Judy Chang, that Christine had been sick, and Brookey told her she was going to stay with her brother. Neighbors were suspicious, as Christine hadn't taken any of her prized possessions, but again had nothing concrete. On June 26, 1998, Brookey rented a storage unit, number 317, again at Canyon Gate Mini Storage in Las Vegas. And that sort of brings us back to 2001 and the body being found. Mesner had been attempting to find Brookey, eventually, searching all around Vegas, and he happened to see her buying a cup of coffee at a gas station. Mesner actually had local PD detain her immediately, and after her Miranda rights were read at the station, she immediately requested a lawyer. Las Vegas reported on the incident, prompting Daniel Haynes to call Mesner and let him know about the unsolved murder of Howard Simon St. John. During her time in jail, Brookey denied killing her mother, but said yes to stuffing her into a barrel, in which she was found after. Brookey was arraigned on May 1st, 2001, in which she entered a not guilty plea. Trial began on July 2nd, 2001, and the trial lasted until July 18th. The jury took a day to come back with a verdict. On July 19th, Brookey Lee West was found guilty of first-degree murder. 2 months later, at her sentencing, she was given life without the possibility of parole. In 2012, Brookey attempted to escape prison by disguising her clothing. She almost made it out the front gate, but was recognized and brought to the segregation unit. And since then, we haven't heard much. She has applied for parole and has been denied at least once. And so she is still in prison in Nevada. Now, why do they call Brookie a serial killer? Because after all, it takes three, and we only really know of two victims. Well, it's widely theorized that Brookie may have had a hand in the disappearance of her own brother, Travis Smith, who wasn't seen after the kind of mid 1990s, though I found no evidence that investigators linked his money to her. He was receiving disability money, and money seems to have been the motive for her killing, but I really cannot find a link that she ever had access to Travis's funds. So I question the validity of it, though it is possible. Yes, she could have been a serial killer. After all, she did seem to go after Chloe Smith, so there is a high possibility. But at this time, we only know of two victims, and so I'm not going to label her as a serial killer at this time. And with that, that is the case of Brookey Lee West. To all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.